Hi there, guys. Phil Akers here, senior coach at the Belfry, and joined today by Dr. Daniel Adams. Obviously, this is the third one in a series where we talked about a few different aspects of the game. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about whether it's more important to be longer off the tee or straighter off the tee, and hopefully just talk a little bit of sense around it, because there's a whole load of talk at the moment whether golf courses are becoming too short, and seeing the likes of Bryson DeChambeau smashing it out there 340 yards and stuff like that. And it's just how relevant it is to average Joe, isn't it? We've got an awful lot of time at the moment and in the off season, and you only need to go on to, I suppose, YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that, and you'll see everybody and their dogs got sort of like a set of super speed sticks and trying to get faster and faster. But for me, Dan, sort of like, how relevant is that to average Joe? What would your sort of views on it be?
I think, yeah. So I think from if we look at the stats, I think it's unquestionable that distance really does play into the hands of the guys who shoot the lowest scores. So distance definitely is your friend. If you have the option and the ability to hit it further, we definitely need to access that and tackle it, because the correlation is right there. The guys who hit it the furthest, more often than not, are shooting the lowest scores. But not always the case. Like when you look at Luke Donald back in the day when he was number one in the world, he's one of the shortest guys, still shooting lowest scores. So ultimately, score is key. Now, when we look at how you increase your distance, that's what I think we really need to be looking at here. It's not just a case of trying to swing hell of a leather and move that club as fast as you can with no consideration really of how you do it or the accuracy implications as well. Because I
don't think it's the case that Luke Donald doesn't want to get longer. Jesus, of course he does. It's way easier for him to hit a 8-iron into a green than what it is a 6-iron. But equally, it's like, at what cost?
That's the key thing. That's the key point, particularly for the average golfer. When we look at the likes of Bryson, who smashes it, and it may go offline, but he's also got hundreds of people looking for his ball, and the courses they're playing are quite open. So if he misses the fairway, well, he's still got a second shot. You have to ask yourself, on the courses that you play at, do you have spotters and searches for your golf ball when you do hit it offline? And when you do hit it offline, are you out of bounds? Is there a water hazard? Is it a lost ball? If the answer is highly likely to be a yes, then we need to really consider not only the distance, but also the accuracy elements to it also.
So it sort of led us down that little bit of a route of like, is it going to go out of bounds and that? And I think a lot of that comes down to actually understanding people's shot patterns. If it's a slicer and you know what, like they're fairly accurate, they hit maybe, I don't know, 50% of fairways, and 40% of them that they miss are right of their target. And if there's out of bounds on the right, then their target in which they have to choose obviously has to be a lot different to just aiming straight down the middle. Or equally, it becomes that case of a little bit, okay, if that's out of bounds down the right, like, and my average drive's going 220 yards, and that will sort of go about out of bounds there. Is it the case that they're better off using a 7-iron off that tee, keeping it in play and stuff with it? So they might be shorter, but they are more in play. And that strategy can be a huge thing, I think, with this. It's not to say that, like, driving distance, when you look at the stats of it, it's almost twice as important as accuracy from a scoring point of view. But obviously, this is situational. This depends on whether you're playing at, I don't know, Sunningdale, where you're surrounded by sort of heather all the way around, or whether you're playing, I don't know, the Brabazon, where you've maybe got a little bit more. Well, Brabazon's a really bad example, actually. It's just surrounded by water all the way around. But, local municipal course, which doesn't have a lot of rough or something, that person that's playing on that local municipal, it's almost sort of like a bit of a field day for distance, right?
Absolutely. But that's a case where you can smash it and let it go. And I think what's also important to stress is if you are a golfer who has a relative curve on your shot, so you may hook it, you may slice it, you may fade it or draw it. So we know the face is open or closed to the path a certain degree. And let's say it's playable, and you've got a gentle curve on your. Let's say the face is open to the path by 3 or 4 degrees, and that's manageable. Now, if we just keep that relationship exactly the same, and we just bump up your club head speed, that ball now, yes, is going further, but it's also going to go further offline also.
Yeah.
So
if you're going to be longer, You got to be straighter, right?
Absolutely, and that's the key thing. Is it's not about just increasing club head speed. We also have to improve the face-to-path relationship and the accuracy procedures as well. Because you might go, yeah, I hit it straight enough now, but if we just give you an injection of speed, right now those alignments are going to cause the ball to go offline and maybe out of bounds every time. So yeah, you're hitting an extra 50 yards, but every ball's out of bounds or in the water.
And I think that is always in an individual's preference, right? Like when people come in, most people are telling me, Phil, I just want to be straighter. I don't care about distance. And I think if most people did actually count fairways, how many they hit, and they look to their percentages, they'll probably look at it and be like, well, I'm hitting 50% fairways. I mean, like, your average amateur male hits 49% of fairways. Yeah. Your average tour player hits 59% of fairways. So, okay, it's like 10%. But you look at the distance that they hit it. Like your average amateur hits it 244 yards, but your average like pro is 296 yards. It's huge distance difference there, and you know. Part of that is down to your average amateur being really inefficient in strike. Like that they may have that club face which is open, and I sort of always explain this to people, like Mike Tyson can punch you as hard as he likes, but if he only glances across your chin, he doesn't transfer all of that energy. Once he squares it up, your head's rolling off down the road sort of thing. So first of all, sort of like, can we make you efficient? Can we get the most distance out of your swing speed that we possibly can? Because, you know, if I get old Joe that comes in and can only swing it at 50 mile an hour, I can't get him to hit it 300 yards, no matter how efficient I make his strike. It's sort of only we're really limited in how we do that. So then the next thing becomes like, what other avenues are there to explore to get Joe an extra sort of 150 yards then, so you can hit it 300 yards down? What sort of things do you look at with that?
So I think obviously a strong consideration would be club fitting straight away. That's kind of the easy buys. You know, is this guy or is this lady using the most appropriate clubs for them? That's going to help them to hit it the straightest and the fairest as well. But then you look at some of the physical stuff. Can we improve your physical capability? But I think what we're going to be looking at here in this session in particular, as we've kind of pre-recorded some videos and some advice for the golfers, is how you move your body. A lot of the times people think they can't physically move their body in a better way. And so they think it's a physical limitation. I've got to go to the gym. Well, actually, there's a difference between not being able to move your body and not knowing how to move your body appropriately. And so I don't want to give anything away just yet, but in some of the pre-recorded videos, when we look at some of the technique, there's going to be some aha moments where golfers have some misconceptions of how they think they ought to move their body, which is actually restricting and limiting their ability to access that distance. So
I think like you just touched upon club fitting with that, and I mean, like, if you look at sort of like the trend over the last, since golf began, like we've been getting longer each year out on tour. What would you say has been the main influence on that?
I would think it'd be down to the material of the clubs, you know, and material of the golf balls, because I don't think even the average golfer, you know, if they are hitting the ball fair, I don't think the average golfer's got that much fitter and that much flexible, and probably even moving their bodies that much better.
For me, like the club face technology hasn't really been able to change that much over the last 10, 15 years. Like how springy the club face actually is
limited.
It hasn't changed. Like it's limited. It's got rules that they've got to conform by, and that's not changing. But equally, sort of like people are saying, I mean, like a couple of years ago, it would have been like, the clubs are going too long and stuff. I don't buy into that personally that much. I mean, like for me, it's more the case that Bryson DeChambeau, he swings the club at like 130 mile an hour. Average Joe swings it at 93 mile an hour. They've both got the same equipment. Bryson DeChambeau is just going to have a huge advantage over you because he's an athlete. These guys, like Bryson DeChambeau is training 3 times a day. He's talking to sports scientists and nutritionists and that every single day to perform better and better. And unfortunately, a byproduct of that is that, you know what, he can now drive the second green at St Andrews. So what's the answer? Do we just allow him to do that? Do we rein him in from how fast he's allowed to get? Is it that we rein in the equipment that he's allowed to use compared to average Joe? Because you know what, if I stick average Joe with a persimmon wood now, he's going to really struggle. He ain't going to be driving the second green at St Andrews with his 93-mile-an-hour club head speed. So there's that balance point of, do people still enjoy golf when they've maybe gone from a 5 handicap with their current equipment to now being a 15 handicap with old equipment, sort of thing? Or
well, I think maybe it's something similar to you mentioned there, is as you reach particular levels, you have to use particular equipment.
Mm-hmm.
You're a beginner golfer. Well, we're going to give you the easiest, most forgiving equipment out there to let you enjoy the game. As we start to see you improve and I'm a professional now, right? Well, all golfers are using one golf ball, the same golf ball with the same, the same material, same limitations, same aspects, the same clubs all the way around, golf clubs. But when you look at it, like say from that perspective, from the average golfer to the elite golfer, without a doubt, I think if we just use Bryson as an example, the physical capability has gone through the roof. The cognitive understanding of what really makes this golf ball fly further has improved. Understanding launch angles
and PC quad and all these things are telling us like, this is actually from this club speed, this is how far you could hit it if you get these things right. And then it's so clear now, isn't it? It's so,
and that actually makes his practice more effective. Like I've seen, obviously Bryson's there with all this technology giving him the feedback. So he hits the drive, and let's say the shot is not exactly what he wants. Instantly, he has very high levels of feedback to say, right, do this more, do this less. The next shot he can do it. Whereas back in the day, when you don't have that, you hit a shot and it's a bit of a, well, I think I did this, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Straight away, the quality of practice is enhanced as well. So he's maximizing his time, he's maximizing his fitness, his club data and specs are being maximized.
So from that club side of thing, obviously, like there's huge gains to be made with that. I mean, like I was looking on the TrackMan site this morning, and like they said that the average man gives up 30 yards of distance off the tee, which is huge amounts of scoring potential for people, isn't it? As you say, sort of like 30 yards isn't necessarily always better if it's going 30 yards more into trouble. But equally, it's easier to hit a lob wedge from the rough close to the flag than what it is a 7-iron from the middle of the fairway from 160 yards, sort of thing. So there is.
I would say, when people ask what's the most important club in the bag, and a lot of people say, well, the putter is. Well, I actually would say no, the driver is, because the driver takes care and enhances and influences all the other clubs in the bag. Exactly what you said there. You hit your driver, and if you can hit it 50 yards further, well, now instead of going in with a 6-iron, you might only be going in with a 9. And now, instead of missing the green, now you've got a chip. Well, now you're hitting the green and you're 10 foot from the flag. A 10-foot putt is easier than a 30-foot putt. So the driver has a knock-on effect on all the other club. The putter is only just looking after itself.
But realistically, average Joe isn't going to go to the gym 3 times a day, talk to nutritionists. They're not going to go and see a physical trainer and so on. So we need to look at different ways in skinning this cat, as it were. I mean, like Luke Donald, he's not going to hit the ball 350 yards like Bryson, but he's still got the capability of beating him. So that he's got to beat him in different areas of the game, right? Like Bryson's stuck a load of his time and practice on driving the ball really long, and he's also spent an awful lot of time on putting really great. Like they're the 2 big areas that he's sort of really focused on. So, I mean, like for Donald, like he didn't have that driver distance. So he kind of needed to be really accurate with it, and he needed to kick butt in a different area of the game. He almost needed to have a different superpower, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So I think for average Joe, sort of like it may be the case if they're not going to go and spend all of that time on getting really good club fittings, getting really big and strong, becoming as efficient as they can do, let's say from the ground up, and looking at sort of centre of pressures and centre of masses and all of this scientific stuff that probably most people are like, what the hell? Sort of like you can. It's not the end of the world. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to play golf and that you're not going to be able to go around St Andrews and enjoy it and stuff. You maybe just need to focus your areas or your specialities in different areas, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, you have to use what you are physically capable of doing. And going back to the average golfer, definitely is not going to spend the majority of their time in the gym, but they still want to increase distance. Well, all we need to do is look at the formula for rotation, because that's what we're looking at, is how fast can you rotate your body. And the formula for torque or for rotation is force times moment arm, which is a fancy word for where you apply your force. So how much force are you going to put in versus where you apply it. So ideally, if you can increase both, then you really do ramp up the rotation. But if you can only do one, if you say, look, I can't put any more muscular force into this, well, we just improve how you apply that force. And that's like, if you have a wrench and you apply it to a bolt, well, instead of trying to apply force right near where the bolt is, apply it near the end of the lever and it rotates. It's the same amount of force. We just apply it more appropriately. And that's the big key message here is, yes, it's about increasing clubhead speed and hitting the ball further, but it's about doing it appropriately.
Okay, so talking down that line, so like Bryson's now gone to what, like a 48-inch driver, something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that apply to that then?
So straight away, let's just exactly relate it back to that analogy. Yeah, relate it back to that analogy. He's creating a longer lever. So think of, we've got an old rusty bolt and we need to rotate around it. Well, if I have a smaller wrench, I've got to apply more force. But if I have a longer wrench, I can apply less force and get the rotation, or the same amount and get a heck of a lot of rotation going on. And that's ultimately what he's doing is, so when you hear the word moment arm, big fancy word, but it's the distance of the applied force. So whatever your force is, could be 10, 5, 15, 50, whatever it is, how much like effort and energy you can apply, where you apply it is actually more important than how much you apply.
I love that. And then I think there then becomes boundaries with things as well, or hurdles that people then have to overcome that maybe they hadn't thought of. Yeah. Be it that now they're using a driver that's 3-4 inches longer than what they were currently used to. You've still got the same centre of mass of the golf club. So you've got to try and hit it in the middle of, sort of thing. And you know what? Like, you're not used to that. So strike and sort of that efficiency of if your club is travelling upwards and downwards and leftwards and rightwards and club face. So them efficiency things still remain really important. I think for average Joe, they're really unskilled at finding the same part of the club face as it is. So then going out and getting a driver that's miles longer for them, it becomes really difficult. So one of the big things that I would sort of urge a lot of people watching this, like during this downtime, especially, is learn how to strike a part of the face, like, and become really skillful at it as well. Sort of like my little 1-year-old boy at the moment's just learning how to use a spoon. And like, I sort of use this analogy quite a lot with people hitting different parts of the golf clubs. Like for Alfie at the moment, he doesn't really have the movement skills or the proprioception to understand, like, oh, that's his eye, that's his ear, and then that's in his mouth, sort of like, so he ends up with food all over his face. Same with the golf club, when people sort of like hit one shot out the toe, next one low and out the hill, and then they complain about sort of the ball's not going far enough, or it's creating sort of like so many different flights. Okay, well, it's going to. The club head is slightly curved. It's, you hit the toe compared to the heel, like, that bit's pointing right, that bit's pointing left, unfortunately. Like, yeah, it's gonna react differently. So one of the easiest things for average Joe is actually just to learn how to strike a consistent part of the face, isn't it?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. That's something all golfers, you don't need super duper physical ability to do that. And another great example is playing tennis. If you hit it up the centre of the strings, that ball's flying off. But you can apply all force in the world, but if you only ever hit it on the edge of the racket, you really are not getting as much bang for your buck.
Exactly. I love that. I think that's really important. So, Dan, we've obviously talked a little bit about equipment with this, and you've just started to go into a little bit about the forces and moment arm with it. sort of that physical side of things, where do you sort of like see that average Joe sort of like has the biggest downfall on them bits then? Sort of like, why aren't they moving their body as fast as what they could do and creating as much moment as what they possibly could do?
So I think it's down to a lot of the misconceptions of how they think they ought to move. They think I should do this, so they do it, and actually that's not how really you should move appropriately. That's actually limiting your ability to apply force in particular ways. That's why, when we're giving a session to maybe a senior golfer, we can go from whatever the distance is to hitting it 20, 30 yards further in a session, not because we've magically increased how strong they are, but because we've changed the concepts in their mind of, I didn't realize I could do that. I thought you weren't supposed, I thought you were meant to avoid doing that. And I said, actually, no, do this, and let's see how we get on. And all of a sudden, the backswing's increased. They haven't got any more flexible. They haven't got stronger. The mobility and stability hasn't changed, but their understanding of how to move has, and that's allowed them more access to create bigger shoulder turns, move the club further, increase club head speed.
So, concept of the correct movement patterns is a big one, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's loads of different ways in which we can gain feedback with this sort of stuff now, be it that you look at sort of force plates, be it that you look at sort of like KVS and things like that. And I really recommend that people do explore them bits as well. Like, if you are looking for extra distance, like, gather information from it. Go see professionals that can sort of tell you how much force you are applying from the floor and stuff like that. But for me, equally, sort of like a good golf lesson should also look into, you sort of just briefly touched upon it there, sort of like, what is your mobility and stability like? Like, can you actually create these movements, even though you've got the right concept of how you should move? Can you actually
do it?
Create that movement? Like, might be all well and good to tell, I don't know, you to turn your shoulders more, but you know what? If you haven't got any thoracic mobility because you're driving all day and just standing, or you're just sitting in one sort of movement, like, actually you've got to be a bit limited physically. So by doing that movement and trying to force it to ranges of movement that you haven't potentially got the ability to do, you're probably going to end up causing yourself a bit of harm.
Yeah, all day long, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's figuring out what you individually need. Some might need and will need physical enhancements to literally allow them to inject more force, or the ability to apply force differently.
Yeah.
So some do need a physical aspect, some do need more of a cognitive mental aspect, more of I didn't realize I could do that. That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. I think one of them big ones probably is like lifting the left heel up. You'll see it an awful lot now in the out on tour, but it's nothing new, right? It's like, you look at Tom Watson, like, he's got like 9 major championships and people have been telling people for years to keep their feet on the floor and that, but
that's exactly it.
Concept.
Yeah.
Sort of like, people want to fit in with the norms of things, and because Adam Scott swings it like that, like, I should try and swing it like that. But what people don't understand is what he's actually got the capability of doing. Like, he's keeping his foot on the floor because he's crazy flexible.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's Adam Scott, so you have to. I'd say if you need to honestly look at yourself in the mirror and say, do I look like Adam Scott? Do I have the same body as Adam Scott? And if you're open and honest, the majority of people, I think the answer is going to be no.
Right, there's some wonderful videos of him on mytpi.com, and like, he's just got the biggest range of movement you've ever seen. Like, he's so mobile. He doesn't maybe need that extra help to allow his hips to rotate, to allow his sort of thoracic spine to rotate and so on. But average Joe does need that help. Average Joe, like, actually sort of can't. They've got really poor mobility. I mean, like, I know that if I try to touch my toes at the moment, hamstrings are probably going to snap and so on. That's the majority of sort of the population, I would have thought, as well. And building your swing around what your physical capabilities are is huge, I think. If you don't want to end up going to have to see a physio or a chiropractor and things like this, I think it's really important that you do understand what your physical capabilities are and then match up your concepts to that.
Absolutely, definitely, yeah. And then maybe one point to finally touch on is how you warm up before you play. Because the majority of golfers just roll out the car, literally roll out of bed, out the car, straight onto the first tee, and no warm up at all. And then they expect it.
What is a good warm up? What would that consist of in your eyes? For sort of like if you've got, say, 10, 15 minutes before a round of golf, what should average Joe be doing before they start hitting golf balls, really?
I would, if they only have 10, 15 minutes before they can start maybe hitting shots, maybe even doing stuff at home previously. Like, you don't have to do it on the range. Warm your body up first of all. Most importantly is the body, the joints, the sensors, the muscles. They need to be warmed up. How you do that, there's endless ways. There's yoga, there's golf-specific exercises that you can do. Doesn't have to be too strenuous because we know there's only a certain amount of energy levels people have, but it definitely needs to be something. If you want to perform at your best, and I would like to think people would, then you kind of need to be preparing as your best. You would never see Usain Bolt just roll out of bed and I'm just going to go off and sprint. He has to warm up his muscles. So I would, first priority is warming up the body. Then second priority would be warming up the swing and the sensors and the feels.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, hit in the middle of the club.
Yeah, and that as well.
So guys, hopefully like you've enjoyed that and that's given a nice insight into sort of what is more important, distance or accuracy. It's very dependent on the individual, and I really recommend that people start to keep their stats, start looking at how many fairways they're actually hitting. If they are missing fairways, how far is it by? You know what? If you are hitting 70% of fairways, like, you want to be longer, mate. Like, you definitely want to be longer. We can't sort of make this long enough, but equally, if you're only hitting 20% of fairways, you should probably be looking for more accuracy over distance. So it's obviously all individual, but on the whole, I think that we both agree that distance is hugely important. The stats would tend to back that up on tour nowadays, and it sort of suggests that hitting it longer is almost twice as important as hitting it straight. So it's definitely worth visiting the ways in which you can hit it longer. It's a really good book. Every Shot Counts. I think that I sort of touched upon it in one of the earlier videos in the series, but it's well worth golfers have a look at that. It explains an awful lot about the importance of distance, how strategy maybe will be affected by distance as well. But ultimately, it's a huge element of it, and you've got a few different ways to access it. One would be concept. How do we actually create that movement to hit the ball longer? Two would be physically. Can you actually do it? Can you create them movements? Are you being as efficient as you possibly can be for your movement capabilities? And you've got like things such as equipment, which are hugely important as well. Once you've tapped into them areas, like, as I say, golf's not just about hitting it long. It's equally that you've got to be able to putt and chip and do it under pressure and understand what different winds are going to do and how that affects distance control. So is distance or accuracy is hard to just say this is it. It's a bit of everything, and there's a lot of different ways to achieve it, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Cool, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed that today, and look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Dan.